it's funny because people who are defending postmodernism are trying to take postmodernism out of context, which is exactly, it's like antithetical to postmodernism. And it seems undeniably true in my modernist phrasing that postmodernism did emerge out of leftism. But I can imagine a different history, or like an alternate universe where a right-wing thinker like continued to go down the line from Nietzsche, and I'm forgetting the name of the philosopher who was talking about the tribalism.
Herder.
Yeah,
Johann
Nietzsche.
Herder.
Yeah, I can imagine an alternate reality where a right-wing thinker continued down the line of Nietzsche and Herder and developed something like postmodernism with all its criticism, like with all its criticism of language and constructs and like how we can't escape our context, and developed a right-wing postmodernism. It's just that didn't happen. What we have is a left-wing postmodernism.
Let's do it. Okay, so no, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's say let's say the Nazis won World War II, and Hegel became, the great state philosopher of the Nazi Empire. And Hegel had like a brilliant student who agreed with all of Hegel's central points, but didn't agree that we could ever reach an emotive, intuitive place beyond and beneath language. And so this right wing, son of Nazism, son of Nazi Germany, disciple of Heidegger. Yeah, it was very much influenced by Herder. I believe that every people had like a different racial psychology and a different way of understanding the world, and a different, they might emphasize more genetics over language, the right-wing postmodernists of this alternate universe. They might, but they might also, they wouldn't have to. They could emphasize language and culture because race tends to be linked with language, or at the very least, tribe is completely linked with language. And so your whole framework, and in a postmodernist viewpoint, your entire system of being has been constructed by the language of your tribe. So you wouldn't have to go to genetics, though they might. Yeah, interesting. They would probably actually emphasize like the link between language, culture, and genetics. Like they'd probably say that those three things can't be separated and that they're ultimately the same thing. So it wouldn't have, postmodernism still has like, it still slides over the ethnic pretty fluidly, but this one would probably be more like, land and blood kind of thing. Land, right. Blood, language. Right. And they would probably use deconstructive techniques to like deconstruct the ideology or like the power structure of multiculturalism. And I mean, actually, we kind of see this happening on the alt right now a bit.
We also see it in intersectionality on the left.
Yeah, they might not. Yeah, this alternate universe right wing postmodernism might not focus on the ideas of opposition as much, like the oppositions in language, oppression, oppressor. It might. Maybe it would just frame it differently. Mm-hmm. Or it would be collectivist, but it would focus on different collectives. I think it would talk about. Well, I'm thinking about what people talk about now, like the globalist agenda to tear apart like individual cultures and races and ethnicities. I think it could set up those oppositions like there's some kind of like destructive modernist force that's trying to destroy our identities. Yeah, probably. And our identities are like the very nature of who we are because of the language, genetic, blood and soil link. Right. It might not say that modernism is trying to destroy the essence, destroy the nature of who we are, or that it's trying to, I guess it's not that different from Foucault, because it's trying to construct us in a different way. It's trying to construct us in a different, well, actually, no, maybe it would, because there is the genetic link. It'd be hard for them to go as far as the modern postmodernists in denying an essential nature. If they're linking it so hard to genetics. They wouldn't have to hang on to genetics, though. Yeah, they'd have to either go one way or the other. They'd have to either hang on to genetics and posit some kind of, at least as far as the individual goes, essential nature, or they'd let go of genetics and let things be more slidey. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if it's like, I feel like it would need to be at least, I feel like it would probably be a master morality. like you guys know the master morality, slave morality?
Yeah.
I guess I'll just briefly explain for the audience. So Nietzsche says basically that like all moralities in history have been divided into master moralities and slave moralities. Master moralities say it's good to be boss, basically. Like it's good to be strong and powerful and smart and successful. And it's bad to not be those things. And slave morality flips it around and says like, no, actually, it's bad to be successful. It's bad to be boss. It's bad to be dominant. And it's virtuous to be, the meek and the weak and the so on and so forth. That there's a righteousness to being the downtrodden. If there was a way for the right to take postmodernism and somehow structure it around a master morality, come with an epistemology that justifies a master morality, which is challenging. That's the challenge.
So I think maybe why this is harder than it needs to be is because you said, well, Nazi Germany would be dominant, and I don't think that's comparable to what actually happened in real life. So basically, if we switch the alternate reality such that liberal capitalism is still dominant, but instead of the right-wing ideology getting demonized and going away, we had the left-wing ideology getting demonized and going away. And so anybody who's a postmodern sort of right-wing person is probably in academia because it's okay to be kind of fascist in academia in this alternate reality. And so what kind of postmodernism would they come up with? And so that's where I was going with that. And I think probably what they would say is that, and maybe to answer your question, how is it going to be a master morality? Maybe fascism has been like kind of discredited, and it, instead of just going away completely, it needs to be fixed, kind of in the same way that socialism has kind of been discredited a little bit, but it needs to be fixed, right? We can still have fascism someday, and it'll be glorious and whatever, but it'll be like there'll be like Hitler got something wrong, and what was it that he got wrong?
Just to go back a little bit, like how would you lay out the epistemology of the slave morality that underlies the postmodernism that exists in this reality?
There's these oppositions that exist in language, and there's these power relations that exist in language. And so you have situations where there's these dominant discourses of power that flow through society. And so, according to Foucault, if you're just articulating the discourses that are dominant, you're not really breaking new ground because those discourses are already they're already active in people's minds. But when you undermine the power that already exists, you bring people's assumptions and presuppositions into clear relief, right? So if you're Foucault talks a lot about there's how we should deal with crazy people. So at the time he was writing people who are there's people who are healthy and there's people who are crazy. That's like a dichotomy. People who are sane and there's people who are crazy. So that's like a dichotomy or an opposition that exists in language and in our understanding. And then the crazy people go to institutions. And every element of their life needs to be controlled. And that's like it's a set of power relations that surround the crazy people. But it also surrounds us. We're just not aware of it. It's the same system of power. We're all part of the same system. And we're also being limited by that system of power. And so if you're just going out there being yeah, so there are sane people, there are crazy people, and it is good that we lock them away, then you're not actually breaking any new ground because you're just saying what people already think is true. But if you point out that set of power relations exists and you undermine it in some way, or you talk about it in a way that draws attention to its artificiality, then you're breaking new ground. And so that's why looking at it from the perspective of the group that gets messed with is, in Foucault and Derrida's view, a pathway to understanding, an epistemological strategy.
So I think you could do something similar. Obviously, this isn't complete. But instead of imagining it as a top-down, the oppressors and the oppressed and the dichotomies in the power structures are set up that way, imagine it if you viewed power as more bottom-up. And there's the masses and the mass culture, which is kind of a crab in the bucket kind of situation. And anybody who's trying to break free from that and be an Ubermensch and gain influence and be a person in and of themselves is pulled down by all of the narratives that society and everyone around them is telling them. So even if you were using that example of healthy people and insane people, well, geniuses and people who go against societal norms are often seen as insane. So you you need to like do some things that were seen as insane potentially, or like live in that to maybe become great and move forward in this right wing kind of way.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's like with Foucault, like he doesn't see it as like there's like an oppressor and an oppressed in most cases necessarily. He more views it as like power is diffused through society and we're all kind of enacting it. And so in a way that almost does like support this idea of more like the crab in the buckets idea, because Foucault isn't actually saying there's like, he says it's more like just during the Middle Ages, it's like the king with his sword. And that's like how we tend to view power, is like there's a king that's like, you know, enjoying all the power. But in reality, it's like we're all subject to power and we're all enacting it on others. And so,
right.
So that does actually dovetail pretty well with like a fascist perspective of like the masses suck, basically.
Right. It's the same, but I think like Foucault sees like we're all subjects of power and we're all enacting it, but kind of like in service of a hierarchy. Whereas this perspective would be all like we're all subjects of power and we're all enacting it. But what it is it's like a toxic, jealous culture that's trying to keep great ones down.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the wolves tearing at each other's heels, basically. Which actually is like, it's not quite Nietzsche, but it's like, it totally works as like a post-Nietzschean thing.
There we go. Right-wing postmodernism.